everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's Meet the Analyst webinar, Retail Trends, What to Expect in 2023. I'm your host, Susie David Kenyon, Principal Analyst at Insider Intelligence in New York City, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Senior Analyst Sky Canavas in Austin. Hi, Sky.
Hi, Susie. It's great to be here.
It's so nice to have you. And Blake Drosch in New York City. Hi, Blake.
Hey, Susie. Great to be here as well.
It's good to have you both. So before we get into the main presentation, I'd like to thank Quantum Metric for making today's webinar possible and welcome our special guests, Alyssa Quinby, Head of Retail Insights at Quantum Metric, and Jose Luis Gomez, Managing Director, Retail and Consumer at Google Cloud. Hi, Alyssa. Hi, Jose.
Hi, Susie. Thanks for having us.
Hey, Susie. Great to be here.
Hi. Well, we're so happy to have you both. So a few things before we dive in. We have a ton of information to share, but there's no need to take notes. We'll email you a link to view the slides and the full recording. But we do want you to participate. So just use the chat window on the right to submit questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll get to as many as we can during the live Q&A. So with that, let's get started. What's on the agenda for today, Sky?
Thanks, Susie. So Blake and I are going to talk about our top 5 retail trends for 2023. And here's what's on our agenda. First, we'll look at how TikTok and Gen Z are shaping the future of social commerce. Second, we'll cover the challenges facing mid-tier brands amid widening consumer bifurcation. Third, we'll turn to retail media's next big move into streaming TV, followed by how returns make or break retail loyalty. And finally, we'll cover how profitability requirements are putting pressure on brands to rethink their business models. So with that, I'll move into the first trend, which is that we'll see TikTok, along with some other Chinese players, shaping what social commerce will look like in the US, thanks to their influence on Gen Z. Now, social commerce has been in our sights for some time now, thanks to the major role it's played in Chinese e-commerce, where it'll be worth more than $450 billion this year, or about 16% of total retail e-commerce in China. Many platforms in the US have been trying to gain a foothold in social commerce, but they haven't been able to replicate what's worked in China, just because e-commerce there has developed under such very different circumstances. But now we have this very powerfully addictive video app, TikTok, whose Chinese parent ByteDance has already been pretty successful at ramping up social commerce in China. I'll just note that between 2019 and 2022, its Chinese version of TikTok, Douyin, quadrupled its e-commerce GMV from $25 billion to $100 billion, and it's still growing rapidly. Now, here in the US, we won't see quite as big a rise with TikTok, but we will see the video app become more of a force driving social commerce forward. In 2023, we expect TikTok to add nearly 10 million social buyers. That's nearly 2 times the combined net increase for Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. And it comes at a time when some of those platforms are pulling back on their commerce initiatives. For example, Facebook ended its live stream shopping feature, and Instagram has pulled its dedicated shopping tab. Now, there are 2 factors that will contribute to TikTok's rise in social commerce, and I'll start with audience. Most Gen Z social network users are already social buyers in 2022. And in the years ahead, almost all new digital buyers in the US will come from Gen Z. That's more than 18 million buyers by 2026. And this is a mobile-first demographic that's a little closer to the Chinese consumer in the sense that they don't yet have such fixed habits around online shopping. And they're going to power the growth of social commerce. So from our most recent consumer survey in October 2022, we can see that while overall purchasing on TikTok is just around 10% overall, among that older Gen Z and younger millennial group of 18 to 34-year-olds, it's fast approaching Facebook, and nearly a quarter of the respondents had made a purchase through TikTok in the previous month. And I should note that Facebook's figures include Marketplace, which is predominantly consumer to consumer, and that accounts for a large share of social commerce on Facebook, while social commerce on TikTok is driven a lot more by brands and retailers. And they are really tapping into that TikTok made me buy it phenomenon. We have 30 billion views here, but actually, as of today, it's surpassed 32 billion. That's how fast it's growing. And TikTok has a clear interest in promoting this trend, and it's adding new shopping features. It started testing TikTok Shop with select US merchants after rolling it out in Southeast Asia and the UK. And this includes shoppable live streaming as a key feature. And it's reportedly also planning to build out a distribution network in the US. At the same time, it's also integrating commerce into its advertising through new shoppable short video formats, and it plans to roll out more of these, including catalog listing ads that don't even require video assets. And this approach really meshes with how Gen Z engages with social commerce. So we did a survey in June 2022, which showed that among Gen Z, finding products that they liked was the top reason for making a social commerce purchase. 45% of Gen Z cited this, and that's significantly above the 37% of millennials, or 40% overall. And TikTok will really continue to drive product discovery through the same types of algorithms that it uses to power its personalized video content recommendations. In China, they call this interest-based commerce. And TikTok isn't the only Chinese player that's now making inroads with US consumers. We have ultra-fast fashion brand Shein, which has gained a 40% market share in the US in just a few years. And Google just noted in its year in review report that Shein was the most searched brand in the world in 2022. And it actually has bigger ambitions than fast fashion. It's building out distribution centers in the US, and it's also looking to evolve into an e-commerce marketplace, according to recent reports from the Wall Street Journal. Temu is a new app from Pinduoduo, which is a pioneer of community group buying in China. And its focus so far, it launched it as an app here in the US as a low-cost marketplace, and it's been topping the US download chart since it launched in September. And there's also, of course, Alibaba's AliExpress, which has gained market share, doubling in the past 2 years. And these firms are all looking for growth globally as they face more challenging conditions at home. And that'll be a boon for price-conscious consumers here in the US, especially young trend-seeking shoppers, though it could also have long-term implications for how social commerce develops here.
Thanks, Guy. Really interesting. So I'm going to kick things off by talking about a tale of two consumers. Mid-tier brands face an uphill battle for 2023. So over the past couple of years, we've seen really positive macroeconomic factors benefiting a really large swath of consumers. This includes things like stimulus checks and, of course, higher wages and stock market gains. And this has made consumer spending and the type of behavior that we've seen around consumer spending look a bit more homogenous than it typically is. But of course, this year with inflation, the tables have turned almost completely. We now have looming concerns of a full-blown recession, and many consumers, mainly in the middle class, are starting to rethink how they shop and rethink their budgets. So what we're seeing now is sort of this re-bifurcation between higher and lower income consumers, while the middle income consumer is hollowing out. And this, of course, is being compounded by the long-term decrease in the middle class, which has gone from 61% of the U.S. population in 1971 to 50% of the population in 2021. And we're seeing this, of course, play out across the retail landscape. We've seen it in a lot of the retail earnings this year. Value-based and discount retailers are thriving under the current economic climate. Walmart, Dollar General, TJX have all experienced stronger than expected sales. Ross Stores is another example. They're expanding. They've opened nearly 100 new locations this year. And foot traffic in general is up at discount and dollar stores. But the mid-tier brands, so think Macy's, Kohl's, Bed Bath & Beyond, they're seeing softer sales and even negative sales growth in certain situations, as its core audience is either spending less or shopping elsewhere in order to save money. So many of the core customers from these mid-tier retailers are instead spending more at the Walmarts and the TJ Maxxes and the other types of discount retailers that I mentioned that are doing really well. And then on the other hand, or the other side of the spectrum, luxury is thriving. So U.S. consumers who were flush with cash from savings and stimulus checks fueled a major rebound in the luxury good markets in 2021, the year after the pandemic started. And while consumer confidence is down overall in this current economic climate, healthy wages and in particularly a strong white collar job market has helped kept upper class consumers spending, which has benefited this sector. That, of course, could change if the macroeconomic environment gets a lot worse, particularly if the stock market tumbles. We could start to see some headwinds right now. Could start to see some headwinds in this sector of the market. But even in turbulent times, sales of personal luxury goods have typically been resilient. We saw strong growth in 2022 amidst this period of economic uncertainty. And even next year, personal luxury goods sales are going to grow 6.7%. We're forecasting right now, which is stronger than the growth for overall retail, which we're expecting to grow 2.9%. And once again, the luxury landscape, we're seeing it play out across retail. For example, with the Macy's core brand that I mentioned, sales have suffered, but its higher end subsidiaries, Bloomingdale's and Bluemercury, have seen their sales grow in Q3. Neiman Marcus is another example. They've reported that 70% of their stores had their highest revenue in 10 years. And LVMH also recorded a sales jump as demand remained strong. So what are we predicting, and how's this going to continue into 2023? Largely right now, we basically consider we expect that this trend is going to continue, that the brands and retailers that are in the most vulnerable position are going to be the ones that try to be everything to everyone. So I'm not talking about the ultra luxury brands like Gucci and Louis Vuitton, as you see, this segment is going to remain relatively unscathed, but it's these aspirational luxury retailers. So think Ralph Lauren, Michael Kors. These are going to be the brands that are going to be the hardest hit if they can't reposition themselves to focus specifically on the upper end luxury audiences, because sales are going to be weak as its middle of the road retailers like Macy's continue to suffer, as those mid-tier consumers are not buying as much into the aspirational brands as maybe they have over the past couple of years. The retailers that are most at risk for 2023 are certainly going to be the mid-tier brands that aren't financially secure right now. So think Bed Bath & Beyond and retailers that weren't really doing so well even when the market was booming. They're going to suffer even more as the middle class starts to pull back. So the hollowing out of the middle, once again, it's going to continue to benefit these discount and value stores. Luxury remain relatively unscathed, at least for now, but it's those middle tier stores that are going to have to really adapt, or we're going to see them continue to suffer over the next year.
Thanks, Blake. And our next trend is retail media's move up the funnel and into streaming TV. So by way of background, we see retail media as digital advertising's third big wave, following search and social. And it's the red in this graphic. You can really see that dramatic increase. So while this has been led by Amazon, that has more than 75% share of net ad revenues in retail media, there's still a lot of opportunity for many other players. We expect this market to top $50 billion in 2023 and approach $60 billion in 2024. And that'll represent about a fifth of digital ad spending. And the latest trend in retail media is that it's moving off-site and up the funnel. Now, retail media really started out on-site, where Amazon has led with sponsored results on product searches. This is where advertisers can easily target buyers with strong purchase intent across categories and keywords. But going forward, it's going to be formats like display, video, and CTV that are going to play a bigger role for retail media. And we can see here that offsite ad revenues surged by nearly 50% this year, and they'll grow by around 38% next year to more than $6.5 billion. And they're making up a bigger share of retail media ad dollars as well, about 1 in 8 this year and 1 in 7 this next year. So it's growing fast. From our last survey of consumer goods advertisers, we saw that while search was still the top retail media ad format, the next 3 were very close. Nearly 2/3 of retail media ad buyers have bought display, video, and CTV ads. More than half have also bought in-store display ads. So we can see that they've already diversified their retail media spend into different formats. And in particular, we see the combination of retail media and CTV as a real game changer for brand advertisers. So as the US retail media market is evolving beyond search into upper funnel formats, streaming TV is going to capture more of the attention and budgets of major brands. This is a holy grail for advertisers. And a number of important initiatives started out this year, but they're really going to mature and bear fruit in the coming year. So first, we have Walmart and the Trade Desk's recent partnership. That's ramping up and promises more data-powered CTV inventory from Walmart. And Walmart's new deal to add Paramount Plus to Walmart Plus memberships could also be a sign of a deeper partnership to come that would bring Walmart's footprint to even more screens. Then there's Kroger-powered Roku ads that also highlight the value of incremental reach and closed-loop reporting for CPG brands. So this grocery chain already has some of the best-in-class data that it can deploy to drive commercials on Roku's ad-supported CTV content, closing the loop on sales. And the proposed Kroger-Albertsons merger would bring industry-leading scale that more brands would take notice of. And of course, Amazon's on top of this trend as well. Amazon's exclusive rights to NFL Thursday Night Football is already underway, but it promises to gain traction with next year with even more advanced targeting. Amazon is also going to bring us the first ever Black Friday NFL football game coming to Prime Video. This is going to give brands valuable airtime because even as shoppers return to stores on Black Friday, a lot of them are now shopping from home as well. And we think Amazon is going to advance its streaming TV ambitions even more by combining hardware, content, and ads innovation, putting its Fire TV Omni series on deep discounts during Prime days and ramping up voice-enabled shoppable ads to bring more performance advertising to TV. And as for where this future media ad spending growth will come from, it's going to be pulled from different budgets. So even though organic growth in digital advertising will contribute the biggest share, there's going to be a shift from trade budgets and other digital channels that taken together will account for nearly half of the $76 billion growth in retail media through 2026. That's according to analysis from BCG and Google. And we'll see this as the effectiveness of retail media continues to prove itself to advertisers.
Thanks, Guy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on with return policies and how we're really expecting to make a big splash in terms of retail loyalty in 2023. So if you've been following the news over the last few months, you've probably seen a lot of headlines in the retail world about the era of free returns coming to an end. So let's back up a little bit and talk about sort of the history of this practice in the last couple of years. Amazon has, of course, really been sort of the trendsetter in this space, as they all of e-commerce. But over the last few years, they've introduced a lot of new ways to reduce friction around returns, which has historically been, a real pain point in the online shopping process. But so not only has Amazon expanded their free return policy to include most of the categories in which they sell goods, but they've also, of course, created these really popular partnerships with Kohl's and UPS to enable drop-off returns. They've rolled out the try before you buy concept, so Prime members can easily try on clothing and return items that they don't want. And in some cases, Amazon has even developed a reputation for just letting consumers keep the items that they want to return, seemingly realizing that it's going to be cheaper for them to just eat the cost of the item than pay for the shipping and reprocessing of such a large level of returns. So with Amazon setting the status quo, free returns have become more popular over the last couple of years with other retailers, even if they're losing money. But now, of course, times have changed. Retailers are feeling the strain of slimmer margins in a lot of cases, and they're facing what is likely going to be an even more difficult year ahead. So a few retailers have notably decided that they're no longer just willing to eat this cost of free returns. And that's where these headlines are coming from. So most recently, H&M and Zara became two retailers to announce that they're going to be testing and implementing charging for returns in certain instances. And they're joining the likes of JCPenney and Wayfair and J.Crew and Gap, who have also amended their return policies over the last couple of years. But on the other end, this is creating a little bit of a split, because larger retailers are not following in the footsteps of the other examples that I just mentioned. In fact, a lot of larger retailers are continuing to follow the trends that Amazon has set in removing friction around the returns process. So this isn't just keeping free return policies in place, but introducing new options to continue to remove this friction. A couple prominent examples that have made headlines recently, Walmart, they've allowed Walmart Plus members to now schedule returns to be picked up at their homes. So you don't have to, the Walmart customer doesn't have to repackage and ship the item or drop it off themselves. However, Walmart and Target also now offer curbside options. So basically reverse click and collect. And Overstock has announced a partnership fairly recently for the holiday season, where they're going to be piloting a program with UPS where the UPS drivers can be scheduled to come pick up returns for Overstock customers. And of course, you know, when you see a split happening in the retail market, it spells bad news for the retailers that are unable to stay on top of these trends in terms of removing friction, because the fact that there are a lot of frustrations and a lot of pain points around for consumers around returns. And not only that, returns are a lot more popular these days for digital buyers. So not only are digital buyers, shopping more and spending a lot more online in general, but due to practices like bracketing, which is when consumers will buy multiple sizes or colors of the same item and return the ones that don't fit, which is basically just a consumer behavior that has happened organically to make the online shopping process a little bit easier. This is making returns a lot more common and a lot more important to the online shopper. And if you look at this chart that we have, it's not just the fact that charging for returns is causing frustration. It's also things like consumers getting frustrated about the inability to return an online process in the store, or their inconvenience by having to use the shipping carrier that the retailer prefers. So the difficulty that is arising for one side of the retail landscape is going to benefit the ones that are investing and hurting the others. So how do we think that this is going to continue, and how is this trend going to develop into next year? Number one, like I mentioned, returns, always something that's sort of this last really prominent pain point in the digital buying process. So it's a no-brainer that retailers are going to continue to invest in trying to remove friction. I think Amazon is really likely to mimic Walmart in providing an at-home pickup option that's free for Prime members. Certain Amazon returns can already be picked up at home via UPS, but there's a fee associated with this. I think in order to stay competitive with the Walmart Plus offering, Amazon is either going to bypass UPS to use their own end-to-end delivery and last mile fulfillment fleet to enable these reverse logistics, or they're going to continue to do so with UPS, but make it free for Prime members. Also, there's an opportunity here that I see for Uber and Instacart and DoorDash. These delivery platforms over the last couple of years have inked tons of same-day delivery partnerships, not just with grocers, but with retailers like Sephora, Best Buy, and Bed Bath & Beyond. And what these delivery services do is they come in and they fulfill the last mile for retailers that don't have the infrastructure for same-day delivery, like Sephora, Bed Bath & Beyond, et cetera. There's an opportunity here to not only continue to expand their same-day fulfillment with other retailers, but also enable that reverse last mile. So whether it's through a paid retail membership or a paid delivery membership with one of these platforms, I think returns pickup could certainly be another avenue for these delivery companies to see growth. And it'd be another way for retailers who can make these massive investments in last mile delivery like Amazon and Walmart and Target do, to meet the customer where they are and remove some of the frictions around returns.
Thanks, Blake. Now for our final trend, we'll look at how profitability requirements are putting pressure on brands' business models. So this year, the costs of doing business have increased. There's inflation, higher labor costs, digital marketing and advertising have all gotten more expensive. And at the same time, consumers too are grappling with inflation and cutting back on their spending and becoming less brand loyal. So brands and retailers are really straining to attract and retain consumers, and they have to cast a wider net than in rosier times. So Amazon has really gained from brands that are struggling in other channels and want access to its enormous consumer base of Prime members, who often start their product searches on the site. We've recently seen firsts of vertically integrated brands partnering with Amazon. So Gap is one example. They've started selling their staples on the platform. Victoria's Secret is another that's selling a limited range of goods on Amazon. And this is happening because this is where the consumer is. And if they're searching on Amazon and a brand doesn't have a presence there, a third-party seller is going to step in and take that sale in a way that the brand doesn't benefit from. So they partner with Amazon, and by doing it officially, they can take control of that coveted buy box that wins most of the sales. And even D2C stalwarts like Peloton are partnering with Amazon, as they've seen sales falter this year and have to seek out new avenues for growth. And this underscores one of the big challenges that's forcing digitally native brands to rethink their strategies. And this is that established brands have already been outpacing digitally native brands in direct-to-consumer e-commerce sales. They're growing their sales faster, and they also account for the lion's share of D2C e-commerce at 75%. So Nike's one brand that's been one of the big movers in this space. It's cut its wholesale distribution in favor of D2C sales growth, and especially online. Its direct e-commerce sales tripled between 2019 and 2022 and now account for about a quarter of total sales. But even Nike has to be strategic with retailers. So for example, it's launched loyalty program partnerships with retailers like Dick's Sporting Goods in the US, JD Sports in the UK, and Zalando in Europe to give joint members extra perks. And as D2C becomes more a channel than a business model, getting that right mix of wholesale and D2C to ensure profitability becomes tricky and challenging. So digitally native brands are going to continue to find ways to expand their reach through wholesale distribution. This not only helps to raise awareness of brands, and serve as a customer acquisition channel, it also helps to spread inventory risk. So Nordstrom is one retailer that's brought on a number of D2C brands, such as Allbirds, which at the same time is also expanding its own store footprint. These brands also have to expand their scopes and no longer just focus on a core product or a narrow consumer segment. So Bauble Bar is one, for example, a jewelry brand. They recently launched a line for kids called Mini Bars, so to give it more multi-generational appeal. And they also have a collaboration with Target. That's kind of the diffusion line strategy that makes a brand accessible at lower price points to a wider group of consumers. And at the same time, even though they started online, they found wide distribution via high-end retailers like Bloomingdale's, Neiman Marcus, and Nordstrom. And digitally native brands also have to increase their footprints through physical retail to add consumer touchpoints. So lingerie brand Third Love is joining other digitally native brands like Warby Parker in opening stores that can serve consumers in person more effectively, while also drawing a significant share of new consumers. Some 65% of Third Love's store consumers are new to the brand. And meanwhile, traditional retailers are also relying more on digitally native brands to stay competitive. So Victoria's Secret recently announced its acquisition of the D2C brand Adore Me. And this gives it access both to fitting technology and online sales technology, as well as a new consumer audience. So the Adore Me consumer is a bit younger and more digitally savvy than the typical Victoria's Secret shopper. And Target has always been very strong at brand collaborations. It recently brought on the cult kitchenware brand Caraway. This helps it fill gaps in its product offerings and appeal to the millennial consumer who really loves this brand. And so for 2023, we expect to see a lot more innovation and experimentation in these spaces. It's really born by necessity. All brands and retailers have to think through how they're reaching their consumers through different channels, and diversified distribution will be increasingly important because brands need to be where their consumers are, especially now. And with that, Susie, I'll turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks. That was great, Sky and Blake. I'm not surprised that the underlying factor around all these trends is really about the uncertain economic times, and not only the impact to consumer behavior, but also the impact to how retailers are running their business. Okay, so before we get to the live questions, and we've had some good ones coming in, so keep sending us your questions, I'd love to bring back our special guests, Quantum Metrics Alyssa and Google Cloud's Jose. Welcome again, Alyssa and Jose.
Thanks for having us, Susie. We'd love to take a few minutes to share examples of how retailers have improved their CX using data-driven insights and trends. First up is apparel retailer Untuckit. So Untuckit actually has product filters on every one of their product pages that customers use to customize and personalize their shopping experience. And using data from the Quantometric platform, Untuckit found that customers were searching for filters like size and fit, but they weren't engaging with those filters on the product page. And so they use this data to inform their hypothesis to restructure their filtering on the product page to make the filtering larger, more prominent, and have those two features, size and fit, be really easy to find. And so they were able to launch that test, and we've got some of the data up on the slide, but just to call out two important highlights, they saw a 20% increase in conversions based on that change, and a 3% increase in incremental revenue from the consumer group that was engaging with those filters, which translates to $1 million incremental win. So really impressive results using those data, trends, and insights from the Quantometric platform. Jose, can you tell us a little bit about Canadian Tire?
Thanks, Alyssa. Look, I think firstly, Quantometric is one of our favorite partners here at Google Cloud. And as a retail geek and having heard of all the changes that are happening in the industry, one of those reasons is that it really shines a light on what's going on within the digital experience for our retailers' customers. Canadian Tire is also one of my favorite retailers. For those of you that don't know them, they have one of the world's most wide selection of canoes. So you can imagine the sort of customer experiences that they're creating. They're also one of the great examples of what we've done with Quantometric, because they really enabled the Canadian Tire team to join operational data with digital experience data, which isn't something that most companies are doing. And what it really allowed them to do was to reduce the friction of the customer journey. And so there were a number of places on their website and on their mobile platform that the teams collaborated on to look at the data and understand how they could remove that friction. Mario, the CEO of Quantometric, always talks about glass doors. In a store, if someone walks into one, you can move the door, you can put a sign on it. How do you do that on the digital website or on the mobile app? So that was part of the work. The other piece that I thought was really interesting was how they enabled the use of all of the data that they were collecting to create new segments to target, to drive marketing ROI and efficiency. So if you think about the different cohorts and how they're engaging with the website, all of that can be used and refunneled back into the marketing experience. And then the final piece was by actually collecting data and blending both operational data and the digital experience data, they were also able to leverage analytics to improve and optimize the inventory allocation process. And that's hugely important. I think everything that we've just talked about right now around the drive towards profitability, the role that Quantum Metric played at Canadian Tire was huge. And you'll see some of the sort of data points that are there on the slide as well in terms of improvement in uplift and people and increases that are also really relevant. But back to you, Alyssa.
So I'm sure that the majority of the audience is familiar with Google Cloud, but you might not be familiar with Quantum Metric. So just to explain who Quantum Metric is, we're a platform that enables brands to understand digital customer behavior and their needs in real time. So the Quantum Metric platform surfaces and quantifies potential errors and opportunities that brands can use to optimize the customer experience and help those internal teams effectively prioritize based on the impact to the customer and the impact to the business. We capture insights from about 25% of the world's internet users, and we support brands across multiple verticals, including retail. And we work with brands like Lululemon, Mattel, Advance Auto Parts, and eBay.
Awesome. So look, we're really proud of the role that we play in enabling Quantum Metric's digital experience analytics solution. We enable the analysis of huge quantities of data. If you can think about all of the data that's coming, the clickstream data that streams in from some of the largest retailers in the world, it's only because of Google's BigQuery data platform that scales to enable Quantum Metric to do all of that analytics in real time, which means that they can look at session data, they can look at areas of friction, and they can help folks engage with that data in real time to remove the friction and to actually execute against that. The other thing that's also really interesting is how Quantum Metric's integration into BigQuery enables retailers to take all of that data and then blend it with data across their business, whether it's operational data or anything else that can enable them to make better decisions around inventory allocation or to solve any of the other sorts of challenges that they come into. So really tight knit, we offer and ensure that Quantum Metric can scale to the size of any enterprise, and then at the same time, and now the flexibility for those enterprises to unlock the value of all of the data that they're collecting. So really excited about the partnership, really excited about the potential that Quantum Metric unlocks, and frankly, coming into 2023, I think it's one of the great partners that's out there. Susie, back to you.
That was awesome. I love getting client examples, especially when there's a Canadian one that's a best in class. Always love to see that. So when you think about the top digital trends that you're seeing so far this year, how do you think that'll carry over into 2023?
It's a great question, Susie. And one of the top trends we saw was mobile first. So here at Quantum Metric, we have a quarterly benchmarking report that we put together based on our aggregated and anonymized customer data. So our most recent report is based on consumer behavior over the Cyber 5 weekend. And what we saw was that mobile made up 68% of traffic and conversions on mobile increased 7% year over year. And for the first time ever that we've produced this report, we actually saw mobile making up the majority of conversions, which has been really interesting. We typically associate mobile with those upper funnel behaviors like discovery and awareness, and desktop is reserved for checkout and conversions. And this was the first year where we saw mobile really owning checkout and conversions at 60%.
And Susie, one of the things that I think I spend most of my time with is the data points that Blake was raising around returns. And so we're seeing just a huge focus right now on how to push customers to the right products based on where they are, what's available in inventory, what's most effective, how to ensure that you have inventory in the right places so you can meet customers where they need them. And then also, how do you nudge customers towards the best returns practices, right? Whether it's keeping a product because there's no interest in returning it, whether it's actually having them drop it off at a store, which store, all of the intelligence that's required to do that, and that the quantum metric platform enables you to leverage. That conversation around supply chain, I think, was really heightened in 2022, and I imagine that 2023 will be no different.
Absolutely. We did a whole Power of Google report recently and talked a lot about how Google is enabling shopping in an easier way. And we all know for consumers, it's really all about making it easy and convenient, and for retailers to try and make it as cheap as possible to get the product in the door. So thank you all. That was really, really interesting. And now it's my favorite time. It's time for the audience Q&A. We've received a lot of great questions, so let's get right to it. So no surprise, some of our listeners or viewers were asking, they're curious to know, Blake, Sky, what are some of the other trends that you thought were important for 2023, but just didn't make it into the top 5? Maybe you can each pick one trend that you think we should be on the lookout for in 2023 that didn't make it today. Sky?
Sure. Well, one I'll still be looking at, even though some of the hype has died down, is the metaverse, which doesn't really exist. But around this time last year, there was so much hype after Facebook changed its name to Meta and announced its new focus for the future. And, you know, some of the hype around it has died down a bit, but I think we're still seeing a significant amount of interest from brands in certain sectors in exploring digital frontiers in areas that do exist. So things like virtual stores, virtual goods, particularly in gaming. And one that I'm especially keen to follow is the use of blockchain technologies for loyalty programs. We've recently seen Starbucks and Nike announce new NFT-based loyalty offerings. And I think these will continue to be explored by brands and become kind of interesting as brands and retailers look to the next frontiers of consumer loyalty and loyalty programs, because as we know, consumer loyalty is waning and becoming challenging. So they really need to figure out how to prove value to consumers in new and innovative ways.
Yeah, I would just sort of crib off that, Sky. And I think, you know, there's been a lot of conversation around, you know, cost cutting, particularly around subscriptions. And I think, you know, retailers and retail subscriptions oftentimes get lumped into the video subscriptions and all of these other, you know, monthly fees that consumers are forking over. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But I think that next year, there's still going to be a lot of emphasis, because as consumers are looking to, you know, save money, they're still going to need to spend, particularly on, you know, essentials like household goods. And a lot of retailers over the last couple of years have invested a lot in building up these these paid loyalty memberships. So I'm talking Prime, you know, Walmart Plus, et cetera, around you know, helping consumers save on everyday goods. And I think that, you know, historically, Amazon has really led the way, and I don't see any, you know, subscription base amounting to what Prime has gotten to in terms of the sheer number of members that they have. But the retailers like Walmart and DoorDash and Uber that are building up this sort of flywheel of services around a monthly fee, I think there's still a lot of appeal there to consumers. So I certainly something that I'm going to be looking into next year, especially because a lot of the talk and the conversation around it right now seems to indicate that, you know, subscription fatigue is setting in and pulling back. And I think yes, but I think the right retailers who have the right flywheel of services that they can offer at a competitive price are still going to see a lot of growth coming from their subscription memberships. And that's a direct pathway into really gaining that customer loyalty, which is going to be even more crucial going into next year.
Right. I think we all know loyalty is such an important factor for next year, especially as consumers tighten their belts even more. So, Alyssa, one of the questions is for you. You mentioned about hearing customer feedback and getting some anecdotes from your customer base. Can you share some of that, what that looks like for 2023, and how can we learn more?
Yeah, sure. So Blake actually touched on this a little bit earlier in the presentation, but something that we also found in our quarterly benchmarking report is the consumer behavior of bulk purchasing. And in our Q3 report on adjusting for inflation, we surveyed over 3,000 consumers. over a third of them told us that they were going to buy in bulk or do kind of like a one-stop shop shopping for holiday. And this wasn't just groceries. This included apparel as well. And we saw that trend clearly occur over the holiday time period. Average order value for November was up over 50% year over year, according to our customer data. And if we look specifically at Black Friday and Cyber Monday, we also see that trend continue, where average order value was $259 for consumers on Black Friday this year versus $131 last year. And then on Cyber Monday, we saw consumers spending $213 versus only $126 last year. So I think it's super interesting to see this data. Like, they told us they were going to do it, they're doing it, and I will expect it to continue in the forthcoming years. And of course, I've mentioned this report a few times, but if you want to check it out, visit quantummetric.com. We've got all of our quarterly benchmarking reports available for you to download.
That's awesome. I think you're right. They say they do it, and then they do it is the best thing to see when it comes to data. So one of the questions, it came for Blake, but I think anybody might want to answer, is around marketing messages. And how do you tailor your messages when the consumer really is starting to bifurcate?
I think that, it's about tailoring towards accessibility and convenience and price. I think there's a lot of ways that I think that marketers can adapt their current messaging around savings, right? I think, look at an example like sustainability. Over the last few years, that's been, really, sustainability has been really prominent in a lot of brands and retail marketing messaging. And I think when consumer behavior started to shift this year, a lot of people were asking, is there still space for that? Because sustainability is often associated with a premium, a price premium, right? And yes, I think that there needs to be some sort of finessing in there. But even with something that is associated with premium, sustainability can still be part of a marketing message, particularly for a brand. But advertise the fact that, sustainable products that are made sustainably and are built are made well, are built to last. So I think that there are ways that you can definitely touch on the various talking points that have sort of you built your brand ethos around, and not just be like, okay, this is a product that is going to you're going to get cheaper, but it might not, because that might not be the case. You can sort of maintain your brand ethos, but talking about value in ways that are still related, and you're not divorcing it from the main message of your brand.
Awesome. It's hard to believe the hour flew by. We have time for one more question. And of course, it wouldn't be a December retail webinar without a question about the holidays. So I think this is for anybody who wants to answer. As we're approaching the last 2 weeks of the holiday season, what are some of the last minute things that retailers and brands can do to capitalize on the strength and the success of Cyber 5? I don't know, Sky, do you want to start? And then if anybody has anything else that they wanted to add?
Sure. So I think this holiday season, we've seen so much emphasis on promotions and sales and discounts. And some of those last minute shoppers might really be waiting on the best price, making sure brands can offer, or retailers can offer that to them, as well as offering them, additional options for payment. We saw that during the Cyber 5 holiday weekend, buy now, pay later did really well and had a big uptick. So being sure to offer that, where that might incentivize sales and get people who aren't sure about buying something to make a purchase at the last minute.
I'd love to add a piece, Susie. I think something we saw was retailers that, one, focused on dialing down customer frustration and those rage clicks, making sure that customers could complete those micro conversions. And 3 key areas where we saw kind of an increase in customer frustration was on technical errors related to buy now, pay later, promo codes or marketing links being broken, and customers having to scroll horizontally on their mobile phone. So I think retailers that can prioritize identifying and fixing any customer frustrations within those 3 buckets can help customers complete their journey and win that sale before the end of the year.
Right.
And Susie, I'd add, as a customer, retailers that make it easy for you to know when your products are going to arrive and help you to filter on that. Because at this time right now, it's about what can you actually get to folks. And coming out of Cyber 5, I think the big challenge is people's inventory and distribution is logged up. And so there's actually a lot of fulfillment angst and frustration that will be encountered. So if retailers can get ahead of that and brands and actually know what they can get to consumers and when, and make those promises and keep them, I think that'll really help them stand out.
Right. And I would tag team onto that to remember that this year, Christmas holiday is on a Sunday. So try and drive your digital shoppers to the store for those last 2 days to forego that frustration about if I'm going to get the gift on time. So unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Thanks again to Sky and Blake for joining us. And a very special thanks to Alyssa and Jose and to the team at Quantum Metric. And of course, our eMarketer production crew behind the scenes, they deserve a huge thank you for making this webinar possible. As promised, we'll be emailing you a link to the slides and the full recording very soon. And before we wrap up, let me take a moment to tell you what's happening across eMarketer's media channels. You can register for upcoming live Analyst and Tech Talk webinars at emarketer.com/webinars. Tomorrow, my colleagues Paul Verna and Ross Benesh will be covering their 2023 trends and predictions for video. I'm really looking forward to that one. On the audio side, don't forget to tune in to Behind the Numbers, eMarketer's daily podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And finally, please check out our e-newsletters. So thanks again for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.